Friday, mostly cloudy and a high of 60. And next Saturday, partial sunshine, 50% chance of a shower, high of 55.
On Owen Radio.
Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How do people deal with a lifetime of PTSD from paranormal events? Why are some people negative about their abduction experiences and some positive? What does artificial intelligence know about the paranormal?
Ooh, those are good questions, Ben. Welcome to the 1021st edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from the WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. It's on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live and on YouTube. I'm Mark D'Antonio, guest co-hosting today via Skype, and Paul is with us too, coming in via Skype as well.
Yeah, I'm around here somewhere.
Cleverly hidden, if you will, Father. And I'm Ben Eno, and so today we bring you an open line show, which it feels like it's been a dog's age since we've done. But we're going to be talking to you about and taking questions on all kinds of high strangeness. And if you have any questions for us, you can give us a call, 401-766-1240, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com. And all these questions that we are going to be taking first, we've received in advance. They were chosen from YouTube. So I guess we can just hop right into it here. And we're going to take our first question from Samro Botham, 8914, which, if I remember correctly, I might be getting confused with a different YouTube user. Actually gave us their legitimate name, but for now we're sticking with the username. This is a question from 2 weeks ago, from our October 22nd live show from the Western Connecticut UFO Conference. And the question starts, another great show, and it's all intriguing and mysterious. The assumption being made is that these visitors are visiting us from deep space, which is not possible because space does not exist. Last year, they gave the Nobel Prize for Physics to three experimental, I'm going to assume that's physicists, who proved the universe is not locally real. I suggest that these visitors are living over the ice wall that rings the Earth. And if anyone wants to scoff again, listen to Admiral Byrd, who led 2 military expeditions across the wall and told us he found land as big as the North American continent.
Ah, boy.
Well, Mark, tell us your thoughts.
You think I have a few? Okay. Well, first of all, with all respect to the fellow leaving the question, and kudos for leaving the question, by the way. That's actually very kind of you to do that, actually, and participate. I will say this. First of all, space does exist. That assumption on your part is incorrect. And we know that for a million different reasons that I won't even get into. And obviously, he also thinks that the Earth is flat because he says the Earth is ringed by an ice wall, and that's typically in the flat Earth models. Completely ignoring all of the mountains of evidence to the contrary. I mean, I can give you many examples of why the Earth isn't flat, and all you have to do is go outside at sunset. Okay, you see that purple shadow which rises up on the horizon, on the opposite horizon where the sun's setting. That's the shadow of the spherical Earth being projected into your local sky. As an example, there's way more than that too. I mean, how come Orion is upside down in Australia, but in northern hemisphere it's not? That wouldn't happen on a flat Earth. Why does the sun stay the same size when it's all the way far away, just rising, and then when it's overhead, why is it the exact same size? It should get bigger, right? Because it's much closer. So as it gets closer, it should get bigger. And it goes farther away, it should get smaller. Why does it stay the same size? I mean, it's almost ludicrous to have to go through this in this day and age. So I do, I won't say I scoff at the flat Earth people. I just say I feel bad because I think science has failed them. Because there are some things we do know, and there is science that we do know. and that's science we know well.
It is interesting. I know next to nothing about the flat Earth theory, only because it's I feel like it's stigmatized, first of all. Second of all, it's like, what I do know of it, it just sounds like a lot of stuff that was kind of borrowed from various mythologies and kind of appropriated in sort of a pseudo-scientific way. Like the idea of like ice mountains bordering the world. I know that's like almost a direct reference to like the Norse creation myth, where like the giant Ysmir, who's like the father of like Odin and Odin's two brothers. Everybody forgets Odin has brothers. And Odin then they then rise up against the giant Ysmir, and then they rip him apart and then use his bones and stuff to basically build the world. And his I think his rib cage or something is used to line the boundary of the world. And I think that there's this sense where a lot of modern thinking kind of misses the mark when it comes to mythology. A lot of it is like it's taken very literally, very two-dimensionally, where it's like, well, these people are just stupid. They thought that, giants' bodies made mountains and blah, 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 blah. And it's, they were just idiots. They were just finding fossils. And it's like, well, yes and no. They had this idea of symbology, essentially. The way that they viewed the world was very fluid, not like, X, Y, and Z. It's like, I brought up this point many times before. The Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor has this very, very succinct view of how we view ourselves, and it's he basically distills it down to two sort of versions of the self. There's the pre-modern self, which is the porous self, sort of, the border between yourself and the world around you is very fluid. There's a lot of give and take, and you're sort of where the boundary between yourself and the world is you can't very easily define it. But then you have the buffered self, which is the modern view of the world, in which there's this wall between you and the world around you, where you can step back and analyze the world, and there's this buffer between you and the world around you. And this idea that, okay, well, they were idiots and they just didn't know anything, and aliens came down and built everything. It's like, oh, that does a tremendous disservice, because you have these like ancient wonders of the world that were built by how some people view them as almost like Neanderthals, when we know they weren't. It's like the Egyptians knew that the world was round. They proved that like right off the bat. Aristotle was the one that was like, no, it's flat, and everyone forgets that too. But Aristotle aside, right? This idea that okay, well, they were dummies and they knew what was up because they just had this very literal view of the world. It wasn't literal, right? These boundaries were sort of symbolic in a way that the symbol of the thing can also be the thing. But you lived in a concentric circle, right? You're in your little hut. Everybody has their huts around you. You build a little wall, and then on the outside of the wall is danger. It's danger. The monstrous is out there. The scary, wolves are out there. You have your food sources and such, and all these things are beyond this wall. So
the wall is a perimeter to all that
Exactly.
And beyond that is the big mystery.
Exactly. And
the danger, as you point out.
Right. And these things are in which that it's a story in which we participate, and that's what mythology is. And so by assuming that it's like, oh, well, they knew what was up there was a literal wall. It's like, well, no. It's like, there's layers and layers of symbolism we just miss as being modern people because we're not in that society, right? Example A, everybody knows the story of Exodus at this point, even if you're not, a Christian or a Judeo-Christian or whatever. Moses goes to the Red Sea, he parts the Red Sea, and then he leaves, and everyone's like, okay, cool, well, he just saved a bunch of people. And it's like, no, there's a deeper meaning to it, because the Red Sea is a mistranslation. What it should say is the Reed Sea, or the Great Green of the East, as the Egyptians called it, which was essentially the Egyptian version of the river Styx. And it adds a different dimension to it. It's like, okay, so essentially what he's doing is he's defying, Egyptian death. and crossing the sea without having to actually cross it, and it adds this different dimension to the story. And there's a lot of context we just miss in this. And I believe, like, stuff like the flat Earth theory and all that is missing a lot of context. You kind of just take little bits and pieces of it, and then you say, I don't really want the rest. And it's like, and I don't really understand the point of it either, because what do you prove? They're lying to us, and it's like, okay.
So science around the world and people around the world for centuries have been lying to us. That it breaks down very quickly. And when Admiral Byrd said that there was a continent the size of North America, he was not incorrect. It is. Antarctica is massive. It's the biggest continent on the planet. So yes, there is a continent the size of North America, but he didn't cross a wall to get to it. That's sort of the myth mixed into the fantasy and then the reality, right? It's just it's, to me, it's amazing that there are people still today that think that this is a possibility, and it shows that we've actually, as science people and as educators, and in most cases, have done a disservice. Not because the individual educators aren't doing the right thing, but they're being hampered by administrative reasons and whatever, and they're not able to teach what they should be teaching. I had a map skills class when I was in 6th grade, okay, and that went on for half the year, and I knew where every country was. I knew what the shape of the Earth was. I knew how long it took to get to places. Okay, back then it was a little longer than it is today, but still, those skills, are those taught anymore in school? I don't think so.
I want to say, well, I mean, to be, it's kind of funny. I don't recall ever having a geography course when I was in high school. It was a lot. It was, I mean, in social studies, they had, there was a vague sort of going over it for a few weeks, but it's like I had the luxury of having my dad, who is essentially an encyclopedia, and also a library in the basement that most people just didn't have. So it was, that was an advantage that I had that a lot of other people didn't. It's why when I was like in, I think, 4th grade or something, I placed in like the top 10 percentile for vocabulary at like 10, because it was, I had my dad. Not everybody has that, and it's, it's like, I always think it's kind of funny whenever you see those like goofy little viral videos, and they're like, okay, name a country in Africa, and here's a map. What's this? And nobody knows like the Congo or anything, and it's kind of depressing. But yeah, I can see how perhaps a lack of education can lead to that. Huh. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, that's that, I suppose. Unless you have any more comments about that, Mark.
No, that's fine. That's all I had to say about it, because spending too much time on it could give someone the false impression that we agree with it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Anything from you, Dad? Do you have any thoughts, insights, anything?
No. You may proceed.
Wunderbar. Okie doke. Now we'll hop on to the next question, which is from the same commenter. It's a summary of our show with Michael Cameron on October 15th. And he writes 2 questions, and we'll take one at a time. How do people deal with a lifetime of PTSD from paranormal events? And we'll start from there. Would you like to give it a shot, Mark, or shall I get the ball rolling?
I thought maybe you had something to say about it, so I was staying quiet for a moment.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not. First of all, I'm going to make a disclaimer. I am not a therapist. I do not practice EMDR therapy. I do not have a degree or a certification. All I know is, what I've read in books, and sort of, I suppose, experienced myself in a way. So take what I say with a grain of salt, because it is, I think first and foremost, if anybody has any sort of a traumatic event in their lives, I highly recommend going and seeking help if you have the ability to. I think that's incredibly important, because mental health is very important and oftentimes downplayed, especially if you go through something that is in something paranormal, if you want to call it that. You know, there's all sorts of support groups out there. I'm thinking like I want to say, you know, anything that's put on. I'm trying to remember the group that Kathleen Martin works with. Is it free?
That's MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. She used to be in charge of the abduction group there.
That's
and
what it was.
there's other people as well now that have taken the lead with her under her tutelage, and it's actually a very good place to go. And the reason I let you go first there, Ben, was because I've had such an experience. So it was such a terrifying experience that I basically had to move out of the old house. Right. So I had to leave that environment entirely. And it was a thing that was shoved up my sinus. I'm a science guy. This stuff doesn't happen to me, right? So what happens when it does? Where does science go in the face of the unexplained? That's a little extra that I do. I mean, it's based on that kind of thing. So there are people that are dealing with events that they don't know how to deal with. I've seen it in the UFO world. People that see UFOs but are told they can't talk about them. It destroys their lives. Oh
yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, we've seen it day in and day out with colleagues and experiencers, etc. And I think I'm a big proponent in trying to get help and deal with it in the best way you can and learn coping skills and process, because it's important. Trying to shove it way deep down and possibly develop unhealthy coping skills is not the way to deal with it. It just makes things worse. A very smart man once told me that stress is stress no matter how you cut it, and it's always going to come out. It'll come out in ways you don't expect, and it'll happen, and it can really mess with you. So it is really 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 tough to deal with in that way. But there are definitely lots and lots of programs out there, to be able to express and be around people who have experienced it as well. And understanding is incredibly important. Someone who can understand where you're coming from, incredibly important. Especially nowadays when it's kind of becoming a little bit more socially. I don't want to say it's more socially acceptable, but it's not as taboo as it once was. In a sense, right? I mean, here we are in the Northeast. Everybody kind of keeps to themselves, and we don't talk about it. We talk about the Sox and the Patriots, and that's it. And maybe the Bruins if they're in Game 7, but other than that, we don't talk about it. And it's
You're right.
And I think if you're living out in California, different story. And so it's important to be able to find a group that you can express these things with.
Let me
Well,
actually... go ahead, Paul.
Okay, just briefly, having experienced PTSD twice in my life, neither of which was paranormal in origin, I can say that you really do need some help. I was 7 years old. My father practically died in front of me. There were no grief counselors. 1961. And later on was a military experience. And nobody gave me any help with that either. And it's kind of haunted me all my life. So do seek some help.
My guess
ahead,
is...
Mark.
Yes. After you, Mark, and then we can hop into the next portion of the question.
Oh, sure. The one thing I wanted to mention too was right on the heels of what you and your dad basically just said. You talking about the Northeast being kind of closed up and not willing to open up and talk about things, and you're absolutely right. We did a show, Ben Hansen, Melissa Tittle, and I. We did a show for Discovery Plus called Alien Invasion Hudson Valley. And we went around Hudson Valley and we were talking to people that have had experiences. And everybody's had experiences, but no one's talking about it. So we had a lot of people from the town gathered under one big gazebo. And this was on a November night. It was 20 degrees out, but we got an awful lot of people there. And they were standing under the gazebo, and we were asking them, how many of you saw things? And they're all looking around for the first person who's going to raise their hand. And then one guy, this guy named Asa, raises his hand. To his credit, okay, to this day, that guy was brave as heck. And he basically said, well, I saw this strange thing, and he describes his craft. Floodgates opened. All of a sudden, everybody else, I saw that too. You saw that too. I saw that too. Well, why weren't you saying anything? Because they're afraid of the stigma associated with being uh, an experiencer or someone who's seen something odd. We know the airline pilots have suffered this as well. Not anymore. Airline pilots are now encouraged to report things that they don't understand, as are Navy pilots, as our submarine force, and it goes on and on and on. In fact, there's training now in the military branches to deal with unknown aerial objects. So that's pretty cool. So we're dragging uh, everybody kicking and screaming into the open about their experiences, but it never used to be this way. I just really feel good that it has become something like this, where it's more open and something we can discuss.
It's definitely like a cultural shift in general for the
Yeah.
for the better, I believe. And now we can hop into the next portion of the question, which is why are some people negative about their abduction experiences and some positive? Do you have any thoughts on that, Mark, or shall I get the ball rolling on that as well?
Yeah, I can just quickly say, basically, like I said, I can never quickly say anything, can I? Well, okay, I can try to quickly say that it depends on the perception they have of somebody entering, say, their house at night, violating their personal space. For me, it was a violation of my personal space over 3 nights. And that was very, very unnerving to know that I was so easily accessible behind all the locked doors and so forth. So, however, I'm open to contact, but I'm not open to being forced into it without my consent. Okay, so I can understand why people would react negatively to that. Um, I've often said, if I could catch the thing that stuck that thing up my nose, I'll wring its neck. Okay, but in reality, would I really do that? No, I'd probably say, wow, you're a scientist. You're actually studying the life forms on this planet, and I'd probably say I'm kind of honored that you thought I was worthy of that. And by the way, why? Because I'm nobody special, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of reasons why people would react negatively. And the positive ones are the ones where they may only remember the good parts because that's all that they were allowed to remember. Because we've also noticed that in many cases, until people are regressively hypnotized, they can't remember details that were less, fun and enjoyable. When they go under hypnosis, they dredge up these moments of sheer terror that they felt. I never forgot the sheer terror. So maybe that's why my experience was negative, right? If it's positive, maybe people were able to have that purged from their mind. So that's a possibility. We know that mind control and changing of memories is something that we can even do now to some extent. So I don't think that a species that's a few thousand years ahead of us would have any trouble doing that.
That is interesting because I was going to say something very similar, and I do agree. Perspective is incredibly important, right? How one views the event is paramount to understanding it, because it's I'm not going to go up to somebody and say you didn't experience that, that's wrong, and it's like, no, obviously something happened, right? We know that that's that someone experienced something. It's very obvious that something was experienced, but I wasn't there. I wasn't the one that experienced it. And I've been saying this for a while now, that the problem of the paranormal, ufology, etc., is the subject object problem, right? There's an objective reality, and there's a subjective subject experiencing it, and then there's this third party on the outside informing the subject, which is prior experience. And so we're experiencing this reality, but it's like one guy's looking at a 6, another guy's looking at a 9, and they're pointing at it and saying the other person is wrong. We know that there's something there, but it's the understanding of it that's the problem. And then there's more questions that can be brought up too. Are they different entities? Are they different species? Or do they have different goals? And that's when you kind of get lost in the weeds, because it's impossible to know something's ideas or morals or objectives, especially if they're completely alien from us, right? I think
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft kind of hits it on the head. He's like, their objectives are unknowable because it's just they don't think like we do. That would be
That's right.
my logic anyway.
I think we can't assign our morality to them either. That's a big one. I mean, some people say, well, they're gentle and benevolent. Why do they have to be? They don't have to be gentle and benevolent. Did you look in nature? Is it gentle and benevolent the way hyenas kill baby lions? Okay. No, and not at all. So, but oh, well, that's just nature. Well, alien life is nature. We're just more civilized nature. And we kill each other, okay, in a variety of horrific ways. So, I mean, what makes us think that aliens are going to be gentle and benevolent? I think that they have to get past a warring, interspecies, interpersonal warring phase. Yes, they have to get past all that to go interstellar. But once they go interstellar, most likely they're going interstellar for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons, I think, is to find other life like themselves. Why? Because every creature on our planet that's ever been developed on this planet, every single living thing, has imbued within it one particular characteristic that's common. And I'm not talking DNA. That's also in every creature. I'm talking about curiosity. Every creature has curiosity at some level. And so the more advanced you are, maybe the more curious you are. And we're looking out. We're looking to try and find other life. Why? Who cares? Because we want to find another place that we can go. We want to find other places to live. We want to find other life like us. We want to make sure we're not alone. And so an advanced species might want to do the same because most likely they're based on carbon like we are. In all likelihood. Now, it makes me a carbon bigot. I realize. Okay. Slings and arrows, let them go. I agree, but it is the fourth most abundant element in the universe. Oxygen is the third most abundant. So carbon and oxygen are going to have an intricate role in life in the universe.
Interesting. And speaking of curiosity, we're going to go to our break. And if you're curious as to what's coming on after the show, you'll find out in just a few seconds. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM here in Woonsocket's beautiful Blackstone River Valley, and we'll be right back.
We've unlocked the vaults, and we're replaying Casey Kasem's American Top 40, the 80s. This week is from November 14th, 1981. That's when Billy Joel said goodbye to Hollywood. Barry Manilow sang the old songs. Olivia Newton-John wanted to get physical, and Foreigner was waiting for a girl like you. You'll hear those songs, all the top 40 hits, and the long-distance dedications from November 14th, 1981, right here on Casey Kasem's American Top 40, the 80s.
You can depend on us for public service. ON Radio.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, with our special guest co-host, Mark D'Antonio, the man, the myth, the legend. And we're taking listener questions and talking about all sorts of fascinating things. And now we were talking about the ethics and morality of extraterrestrials. So if you're not riveted by that, I don't know what else we can do for you. But I guess we can hop into the next one, which I guess this kind of goes along the same lines. This is we're going to skip by a couple of the YouTube questions here. We're going to go to one from Facebook because I think this is a perfect segue into what we're talking about, which is from Claire. And the question asked is, do you believe that ETs have prevented nuclear first strikes even recently? The fact that UFOs have been seen at weapon storage areas and the weapons were found deactivated has to mean something. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I would say that there is some logic to that, but I know Robert Hastings, the man who wrote UFOs and Nukes, basically that book, and Bob has a lot to say about this. I mean, he did a lot of research and shows that it seems that as we have gotten into our nuclear age, they have become, they being alien life, if it's here, right, as they say, have become far more interested in our nuclear facilities. Now, why? Is it because they want to stop us from destroying ourselves? I actually don't think so. I think that's the comfort food that we'd like it to be. But I don't think that's it. I think that they kind of are completely divorced from that notion. Again, that's us assigning our morality to them. They don't want to see an innocent little species die. How do we know? They may not care. For them, the way they treat people that they abduct, they don't say, here, come on aboard our spaceship. We're going to give you all kinds of memories to remember what we are and how nice we are. That doesn't happen by and large. So usually it's surreptitious. They figure out ways to tag us and ways to study us, like we tag elk in the Yukon. We put big radio collars around their neck, right? Well, I think that Phil would notice a big collar around his neck when he comes back from being passed out on the front lawn, and he looks, what's that? Any pizza left? I mean, we're gonna notice. We're gonna notice these things. So they do more surreptitious means, and it looks like they can wipe our memory, just like anesthesia does. If you've ever had some anesthesia, general anesthesia, you forget the minutes before you go under. You can't remember those moments, and that's because the anesthesia wipes your memory. It's a not a designed artifact of general anesthesia. It just happens. Okay. I struggled to remember some of the times I was on general anesthesia, trying to remember what happened. I was told I was talking to the doctors. We had conversations, and then I went under. I don't remember that, but what I remembered under hypnosis, who knows? But the thing is, okay, an alien life form here would probably be divorced from trying to meddle in our affairs, because that's not important to them. I think what's important is understanding us, because they found a carbon-based life form that's probably like themselves. We don't look very much alike. We might both walk on two legs, because that is a naturally selected path on our planet that led to more intelligence than less intelligence. So perhaps that is something that is the only connection we have. I don't think they've stopped anything, because I think they just observe, and they're immune to whatever we might do.
Yeah, What
do you think of that?
Now the gears are turning here, Mark.
I imagine.
Well, I don't know. I wonder if we always talk about the idea of technologically advanced versus morally and spiritually advanced. But then, if we're dealing with something that's completely alien, which in this case we are, then there would be no sort of reference point that we could use to understand, other than our very limited experiences with it, right? And you know what? A lot of people criticize me for saying right all the time, so I apologize for those who have criticized me in the past for that. It's a bad habit.
Right.
Exactly. There we go. Now I'll find a different synonym for it. So the idea, I guess, that would need to be explored is, what limited interactions have we had that would give us the impression that, these entities are benevolent. And I suppose seeing a craft that comes down around the nuclear site and then disables the nuke, your first thought would be, well, one, terror, like, oh my gosh, someone can actually do that. That's horrifying. Then the other thought, if you're hippy dippy and you're all anti-nuclear weapon or whatever, which I'm all for personally, would be, oh cool, they're on our side. And then, or if you happen to be an enemy of the state and you see that happen, you say, cool, they're on our side. And it's it's seeing these things happen, it makes one wonder, it's that same subject object problem, right? We know something happened. There's an objective reality there that something happened. A craft was seen, nuclear device was disabled. We know we know, quote unquote, no. We've heard these anecdotes. There's reports of it, but what do we do with that data? How do we interpret it? And you can kind of go a couple of ways with that. One being the, oh cool, they're benevolent. Oh cool, they're enemies of the state. Oh cool, they're our allies. The enemy, my enemy is my friend. But there's a whole gambit of reasons why, but they're human reasons.
And you could also say, or they disable them not on purpose, but by the nature of the way they travel, the radiation that their ships may give off may have disabled them automatically, or they shut them down because the armed nature of the weaponry kind of made them think that, well, wait a minute, something's going to happen here that may not be good. Let's just shut that down so we can do our study. In other words, they might have done it entirely to benefit themselves, not us, not anyone. They may not even know what they're stepping into. Because how would anyone know what the geopolitical landscape looks like just by visiting our planet? We assign this sometimes, we, not you, meaning people generally assign this vast intelligence to alien life, like they know everything. No, they don't. They're not what we would call a god. They are fallible beings that come from another location, very likely. And when they're here, they're carrying out their mission. They're doing their thing. And if we get in the way, they shut us off, or they turn off our weapons so they can continue their business, perhaps. So I don't think that it may be not a conscious thing, but on their part, but an intentional thing, perhaps, if necessary, to finish their research or do their research. It could be a consequence of their propulsion or lack of. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why it could be, just like you say. There's a plethora of reasons that this could be happening. But to assign a human emotion to it, like, oh, they want to protect us, that's really a too early to tell thing.
You said the operative word there, Mark. The secret word, if you will, which was God. Lowercase g gods. I have this working theory that I have no way to prove, but it's a fun little game theory that the paranormal in general, anything supernatural, right, or unknown science is like the mythology of the modern world, and it's this sort of fun fringe thing that is sort of like, oh, we're in a very we can live very boring lives, but if you're getting up every day, you just go do your 9 to 5, you come home, you eat dinner, you go to bed, you do it all over again. There's no sacred, there's no fun sort of, I don't want to say the word spiritual because it's not really the right word. There's no story to be a part of, right? So you have conspiracy theories, and you have aliens, and you have ghosts, and you have all these things, and it's like, wow, this adds so much meaning to my life. That adds some sort of depth, and it's this thing that's like, okay, we know that there's something supernatural out there. There's something extra. There's something above us. And perhaps it's aliens coming down and helping us, or the ghost of my grandma coming to say hi and make me a cup of tea or something, or whatever. And it's this thing that is a part of daily life that people talk about sometimes. They'll be sitting around, you're having a beer or you're at dinner with people, and you say that weird thing that happened to you, and everybody gets really interested, and you get really into it. And it's this sort of portion of the modern world where it's that little bit of sacredness that's still left, but it's this like anomaly that you could probably explain with science, maybe, but there's still that little bit of mystery left in it. And I think that this idea right here is sort of like a hyperbole of it, right? That it's like, okay, well, they're here to help us, they're here to save us. It's a hyperbolic version of there's something a little bit beyond us every day in this very boring, flat, two-dimensional world that we built for ourselves. And it's that two-dimensional sort of Hegelian nightmare that we live in, where everything can be explained, everything is there, that little bit of mystery is still there, and we crave it, we need it. And rather than try to explain it with logic and reason, it's kind of just fun to think about, and then eventually you can get obsessed with it and it kind of take over your life. But, it is what it is. It's that portion of reality that's that extra bit, that little bit of spice. And so this idea of assigning morality to these things, it's nothing new, Mm-hmm. This is something we've been doing for millennia, There hasn't much has not changed in the last, few thousand years. The only difference is the technology around us. Everything else, it's not too different. Human nature really hasn't changed that much. And Stanton Friedman pointed that out in one of his famous statements, which was, if an alien presence came down, they'd see nothing but tribes that their primary activity is just warring with each other. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what they would see. Nothing's really changed. We're just changing the terms around, and so that's my little soapbox rant for the day.
That's actually a prescient thing to say, though. That's very true. So I agree with everything you said.
And so, well, I like when people agree with me. It's not often,
right?
But so I guess we can hop into sort of a slightly different version of this question, and this is a question from JTeddy11 from our May 7th show with Dan Harari, which is what happens after aliens arrive, and he wrote a really interesting little book. He called it his it was like his wish list of what would happen after aliens arrive, and I was hoping it would be something like Roadside Picnic, but it was not. And so the question is at the 23:25 mark in the recorded show, for those who want to go back and listen to it. The book sounds like it could have been a really good Twilight Zone episode. How solving all of man's problems turns out to be a very bad thing, and doing that goes against the natural order, in all caps. Something tells me this author does not see the world like that. When someone talks and believes in the climate change narrative that humans in society actually did and are influencing the current surface temperature of the planet, shows their lack of wisdom and their predilection to be led astray. So I think I see what the point is. But I do like I did ask this question of Dan then, that it's like, okay, well, why would the aliens solve all of our problems? And is that actually a good thing? Sort of like a reverse Deus Ex, well, sort of like a Deus Ex Machina, but that was just my opinion on the whole matter, because I just don't think they're here to solve all of our problems. That's just my whole thing there. I also think it's interesting because in Dan's book he talks the basic story is this if I butcher it, Dad, just let me know, because I'm trying very hard to remember that. Essentially the story is this guy, he's led a miserable life, and he's like about to like commit suicide, and these aliens save him, and they're like, all right, you're going to be our ambassador to Earth. So whatever you want, we'll do it. And so, he goes to the UN. The UN's like, okay, well, we want you to, what do they want? And so he kind of explains the whole thing. And so he presents this wish list to them. And then the whole other half of the book is like the consequences of the wish list. And it's interesting because it does put forth this idea that, sure, they could solve all the problems, but will they? And if they do, what would that even mean? Yeah, because then, honestly, I think more problems would just pop up in their place, because that's kind of what's happening with us now. We're trying to, solve all these issues on our planet, and it just ends up making things worse in most cases, or has unintended side effects.
I agree with that. I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, if someone came along and solved all our problems, then we would stop solving problems. We would stop trying to figure things out, because hell, they'll do it. They'll do it over there. I don't know. 2 and 2. I used to know that. What is it? Torg. Yeah, from Beta Alpha 9. What is it? He says 4. I guess he's right. I mean, that's obviously an exaggeration, but you get the point. At some point, we're going to stop innovating. We're going to stop trying. And if you stop trying, you stagnate. And if you stagnate, you die.
Well, there was a really interesting. I was listening to this lecture a while ago that was the decline of creativity, and one of the key components of creativity is boredom. Because if you're bored, you try to find things to do, and you use your imagination, and you try to figure things out, and try to come up with solutions for things. If you're constantly stimulated and entertained, and there's constantly something happening, there's no need for you to do anything. And you stagnate and you do nothing, and so
That's right.
It's the same deal. And I remember listening to that, and I was like, oh, geez, I got to stop playing video games if that's the case. I was like, I should get back to doing creative things again, because it's there's a difference between disassociating for a little bit to kind of recharge and then going back to it, and then just staying in that state. Very different, very very different things. It's like
I'm sorry. There's a really good movie that everybody should see that points out this problem exactly. It's animated and it's called Wally. Wally. That movie is fantastic because everybody on this ship is everything done for them. They don't even have to walk anymore. They ride in these little carts that move them around anywhere they want to go, and they look at the world through VR headsets. They don't even see the real world around them, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, now there are these big giant blobs on chairs that are all mobilized for them. Everything's done for them. So, in other words, what good are they as a race of people, as a civilization, right? And then Wally comes along and upsets the whole apple cart, right? So I think that's pretty cool. So that's a neat movie, and that's actually had a lot of prescient thoughts in it that everybody should learn.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that too, actually, and it is honestly a very poignant movie. That was one of my first sound design projects, was redoing all the sound design for it. That was a lot of
Really?
Yeah, that was
Oh, cool, man.
that was I was given like a 20-minute clip and I had to redo all the sound design for it. That was a lot of fun. I don't know how the guy got all the stems and audio stuff, but he was like, "Yeah, go for it. You just have to mix it." And it was kind of cool. Anyway, not what we're here for. But there's a really interesting sort of dialogue between Plato and Socrates I reference a lot because it's very important. Where, Plato is going on to Socrates. He's like, "Wow, isn't it great that the Egyptian god Thoth gave them writing?" And Socrates goes, "That's not great. That's terrible. No one's going to remember anything. They'll write it all down. It'll disappear, and no one will remember anything." And I thought that was really interesting. And there was a sort of idea that was posited by this writer I really like named Paul Kingsnorth, who talks a lot about, but his whole thing is he was a former environmentalist from the 90s, and he did this whole lecture on how the environmentalism movement changed a lot from the 90s to the early 2000s, where it became a lot less of we should pull back from, creating waste to let's use money and technology and throw that at the problem to fix the environment. Because he was more of a naturalist, and over time he was like, okay, well, we need to shift away from cities because it's not sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. And his colleagues were like, no, let's just build solar farms. And he's like, we have this company lined up and blah, 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 blah. He's like, it turned from, wanting, a holistic change to, throwing money at problems. It doesn't actually fix anything. If you look at, He's like it makes an impact, but but the difference is very stark. It's using these sort of human-made elements to try and fix the things we broke, rather than dealing with the actual problem. And I thought that was really interesting because it's that same idea, that the idea of using technology to augment oneself, right? Because essentially we're all already cyborgs anyway. I have augmented vision with glasses. I'm using, technology to speak to you people in a way. I'm, in a sense, we're all already cyborgs, even if, whether we like to admit it or not. But now you can feel cool about yourself because you're like, okay, I have augmented vision. And it's like, well, I have contacts. It's, or I have glasses. And it's like, I have enhanced vision. I can see things. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm blind as a bat without them. But
and Google Glass, right? People wear glasses and they can see and get information directly from their glasses, like with the Google Glass. I mean, that's the beginning. Sooner or later, that's going to be an implant in your head, and you'll have everything you need right there, and you'll be able to download probably educational lessons that you can download and put into your brain once we understand where it goes.
So, have you ever read Ready Player One?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It is. I do like it. The sequel was not that great, but the first one was really interesting. And I was listening to something about that, and it was some podcast I listened to a while ago with this woman named Dr. Paula Boddington. She does the ethics of artificial intelligence. It's very interesting stuff. And the whole thing was brought up where there was a change in narrative around the same time as this idea of environmentalism, etc., where the idea went from The Matrix versus Ready Player One. The Matrix, in which you escape to reality and destroy it. And then Ready Player One positing the idea, which if those of you who've never read it or seen the movie, don't watch the movie. The book's much better. Where essentially they're in this dystopian future, and they all interact with each other via this like sort of I guess the best now there is literally a metaverse in which people can do this, but it's like it's like a virtual reality world in which people go to work, they go to school, they do all these things, but their real lives they're living in like trailer parks and stuff, and it's very depressing. But the end of the book essentially is okay. Well, instead of escaping the Matrix and turning everything off, it's about who controls it. And it's two very stark ideas in how one deals with this version of reality, right? Instead of okay, well, let's just get rid of it and live real lives, a la the Matrix. It depends on who's in charge of it, a la Ready Player One, and it's those two very stark realities that are presented, and you kind of have to pick the pill, right? Is it who controls it, who's the most benevolent, which, anybody who's given a lot of power, that's very, it's very hard to maintain one's ability to be humble versus getting rid of all of it. And I think that at the end of the day, that idea of who's in control of it versus getting rid of it altogether, I'm trying to loop this back into the UFO stuff because that's how this all got pushed onto me, was this idea of everybody fixing everything, right? If we could just fix everything, if the right person's in charge, and if that person's really good, it's that's it. That's we don't need to change the system at all. We just need somebody to fix all of our problems. It's like no, it's probably not the case, and it's the idea of who's in charge versus leaving the Matrix.
I agree with that. That's a really good assessment, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So.
I listen to a lot of lectures, Mark.
I love it.
It is fascinating because it's these very different ideas of technology, and I think as a species, we're still so naive and so young that I don't think technology is bad. It's very ambiguous, just as humans are very ambiguous. I like to think people are pretty much good, but they can surprise you every so often. But it's ambiguous tools being given to ambiguous creatures, and who's to say that extraterrestrials are not ambiguous? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and who's to say that if we keep advancing as we have, we might get to the point where we reach this technological singularity, where we reach the pivotal and the peak of our potential development, and then the only way we can go further is to employ artificial intelligence. And then we become fully dependent on artificial intelligence for our continued survival. And that is truly a more scary part, right?
I would agree.
I think
On that
Google.
note,
Yeah.
better get to the announcement.
Yeah, I know, before we launch into another tangent, as much as I would love to. But we'll hop into the announcements here. So over the next few weeks, my dad and I, well, hopefully, it's been pushed off to the beginning of the year now. We'll be working with Reverend Michael Carter of Ancient Aliens on a very special podcast with new information that he has uncovered on the Ancient Aliens theme. And this will be a fully videoed and audioed and all that good stuff, and that will be posted on our YouTube channel once we get more information on that. So stay tuned. The Greater New England UFO Conference / Bigfoot Conference is back, and this will be a one-day event on November 19th at the Veterans Memorial Center in Leominster, Massachusetts, and you can look for more on the New England UFO and Bigfoot Conference on Facebook for more information.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was happening again. I'm so happy it's back. And by the way, guys, you can visit our new website or our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find literally 1,200 hours plus of regular shows and special broadcasts, all since 2008, from places like CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and even here on WOON AM and FM. Also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, which include iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
Now, Mark, where can people find out more about you?
Little old me? Oh, well, they can find me at skytourlive.com, and that is our remote observatory site. We will, I'm also at fxmodels.com, but skytourlive.com is where we are. And feel free to join us, explore, ask me questions. I'm an astronomer. This is what we look like. Ta-da! So, enjoy.
Very relaxed.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do we have next week, Ben?
Well, next week, that's November 19th. Geez, we're speeding through November. Philip Mantle and Dr. Irina Scott will join us with new evidence and new witnesses from the Pascagoula, Mississippi abduction case of 1973.
Wow, that sounds cool. You know what? I do want to leave you guys with a thought today, and that is that today's paranormal could very likely become tomorrow's science. I'm Mark D'Antonio.
You know, I use that quote, but I always credit you.
Well, that's great. I mean, I've always felt it was true, Paul.
Undiscovered
I believe
science.
it too.
That's what that.
I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno. And thank you for joining us on our cosmic journey. And we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Blackstone Valley's ON Radio.
Broadcasting live and local daily from the Navigant Credit Union broadcast studio at the corner of Park Avenue and Kennedy Street in Woonsocket. This is ON AM and FM.
WOON Woonsocket.
And now, Premier Networks proudly present